Again, as I said, Kentucky's own outlaw poet, Ron Whitehead. Ron grew up on a farm right here in Kentucky. He attended the University of Louisville and Oxford University. As a poet and a writer, he's the recipient of many state, national, and international awards. And I was kind of surprised to see here, Ron, that you were actually nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature. That's pretty good, man.
That's correct. Thank you. The Bone Man dances circles round the subterranean gloom, paints pink and blue and purple until he fills the room with the smell of roses and a pandemonium moon. Hello, everybody. Hi, CJ.
Hey,
it's an honor to be out here tonight. Yeah, Dr. John Rocco, James Joyce Scholar up there at State University, New York Maritime, author of many books. Out of the blue, he's reviewed a lot of my books and CDs. In 2006, nominated me for the Nobel Prize in Literature. It's just an honor to be nominated.
Sure. And
once you're nominated, you stay in the pool as long as you're alive.
Well, that's awesome, man.
I like to swim.
Right. You know, I was thinking, man, well, you know, I was going to say you're very poetic. Well, you're a poet. You should be.
Well, I'm a farm boy, and I'm a wilderness pioneer lands, a Kentucky farm boy. I grew up in Ohio County. That's the same place that bluegrass music was birthed.
Sure.
Bill Monroe, the Monroe family lived up outside of Rosine on Jerusalem Ridge, and Mama, the oldest of 13, I'm the oldest of 6. Mama was the oldest of 13, and her dad, granddaddy, Raymond Dick Render, who's been written about in recent the legends of country music, the origins of country music,
sure.
Came out from Oxford University Press as a chapter on my granddad in there. And Granddaddy and Mama used to sit on the front porch with Mama's sister. Mama sang alto. Joe Carolyn, her sister, sings soprano. And they would travel and tour with Granddaddy, and they were quite a group, but they'd sit on the front porch with the Monroe boys and sing up there at Jerusalem Ridge, and our distant cousins, the Everly brothers, across the Green River over there in Muhlenberg County, in Brownie, just outside of Drakesboro, not far from Central City. Well, Mose Rager, another legendary country musician, taught the Everly brothers and Merle Travis pretty much everything they knew about music, and Mose was a barber, and so was Granddaddy. Granddaddy was a jack of all trades, and so sometimes Mose and the boys would come over to Centertown, Kentucky, there in Ohio County, population 323, and they'd all hang out in a barbershop and sing and play music and tell stories, and then they'd go over to Brownie and do the same at Mose's barbershop sometimes. But so I grew up, I was listening to old-time mountain hillbilly, going back to Ireland and Scotland and Wales music, those old ballads, and that ancient music and storytelling. When I was in the womb,
sure.
I grew up on that.
And I hate to quote a movie, but you're steeped in that old-timey music, aren't you? I mean, you get it honest.
I do. Mama and her sister Jo sang at every wedding and funeral in the entire region for miles and miles around, and they drug us kids to every one of those weddings and funerals, and that's one of the main reasons I get weddings and funerals confused to this day.
Yeah? Well, you know, there's a lot of similarities. I mean, it's a celebration of life and a celebration of death. Really,
yeah, and often, well, yeah, we could go into that. Some people think that death is a marriage and a wedding, and some people think that marriages are, well, sometimes they don't end up too well, do they?
Right. Well, you're mainly, and we were talking a little bit off the air about, you know, how music and poetry are, you know, very closely interrelated. But you're mainly known as a poet, and you know, an outlaw poet. Tell me, how did you get started in writing? I'm assuming that you started reading poetry and literature first.
Yeah, I was, growing up on a farm, 5 or 6 vehicles would pass near the house each day, and so the vehicle I watched and listened for was the postman.
Okay.
And so that was, I recognized early on that could be Christmas. So when I was 5 years old, I joined a couple of book clubs, the history and biography book clubs, which I found out about from Grit Magazine. I sold Grit Magazine door to door in Centertown and to the farmhouses in the country around there. And from the earliest days, I didn't even know what it meant to be a poet, but whenever I walked across the yard, through the fields, through the woods, I walked with a rhythm, with a beat. And so we dwell in space, we measure space with time, but if that's all there was, life would be boring. It'd be a monotone, tick-tock, tick-tock. There's another element, a magical element called rhythm, and it's rhythm that brings the poetry and the music to life. And as far as I'm concerned, music and poetry are the languages of angels, and they're gifts to us humans. And I feel like I've had this idea, this notion that music and poetry are in bed together, making love, having babies, called poems and songs.
Right.
And so, I've been blessed to travel the world, sharing my poetry with folks around the world and listening to their poems and songs. I've done over 6,000 shows around the world, 5,000 of them with musicians and bands. I love every kind of music. And so the musicians I've known, most of the best of them, they love music. They want to be poets too. And the best songs are poems. Sure. And the best poems are musical.
Right. Well, everybody, if you just tuned in, we're here with outlaw poet Ron Whitehead. And Ron's brought a copy of his book here tonight, Beaver Dam Rocking Chair Marathon, Fragments of a Lost Text, the Bone Man Saga Books 1 and 2. And we're going to come back in just a minute, and I think we're going to have Ron read an excerpt out of that book. But right now we're going to play a little music.